I'm Rich Taylor, a sales engineer with Squirrel Compliancy Solutions. And today we're going to be highlighting the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA's, most recent announcement as it relates to CVE 20333 and 20362. On Thursday, September 25th, CISA announced a vulnerability as it relates to Cisco ASA and FTD software. Within their article, there's a link to the actual directive, and the directive provides insights on next steps and how to remediate the open vulnerabilities. Within this article, there's also links to the target CVEs, CVE-20333 and 20362. Those links take you to the Cisco supported website, which covers down on the target CVEs. As we can see, this relates to the Cisco ASA and Cisco FTD software and those configurations that may exist on those platforms. Now, what we're looking for is IKE v2 configurations as it relates to configurations on the platform for a configured port, or web VPN services, whether they're enabled or they have MUS, mobile user security configurations present. And that's how it relates on the ASA. For the FTD, we're looking for those IKE v2 configurations in addition to the web VPN being enabled, therefore making the software vulnerable to potential attacks. Now, 20333 is showing as critical. We also have the second CVE, which is 20362 for the same platforms, and we're also looking at those same configurations as it relates to IKE v2 and web VPN services, whether it has mobile user security or if it's even enabled. Now, these configurations are the same across both platforms, and certain OSs are impacted. So we have to validate the OS version, and even if these configurations are present. So the Squirrel Compliancy Solutions team has taken time to develop rules to evaluate the target FTD or ASA platforms for the current operating system version, in addition to those configurations as it relates to being vulnerable for those IKE v2 and MUS configurations under web VPN services. Now, logged into the portal, you can either click on the knowledge base, or you should see a recent article as it relates to the CISA Emergency Directive 25-203. You can click on this, and that will give you a link to download those rules that we have created to validate those platforms for said configurations. So you'll click the link to download those rules. We additionally have links to the CVEs within the article as it relates to the CISA announcement. Now, I've gone through the process to import those rules into my Squirrel Defender instance, and you must be on the current version of Squirrel Defender, which is version 2.3 MR0.1.0.0.G Flying Squirrel. Now, after the rules have been imported, I created a policy to house these CVE rules and then added them to my audit. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this audit. You get a pop-up at the bottom, audit scheduled successfully. So I'm going to navigate to audit status. We can see that my audit is queued up, so it's using those Docker containers, single SSH session to each of those assets, performing that analysis, checking the OS version, and if those vulnerable configurations are present on my ASA devices. I'm going to refresh this. And we can see that our audit completed in 5 seconds against those 2 assets, and it came back with 10 findings. I'm going to look at the findings summary for these assets, and we can see that we audited 2 different ASAs. One came back with no findings, but one came back with 2 sets of findings. Now, if we remember that CVE 20333 and 20362 are checking for those same configurations on those assets. So we are going to have critical and high findings for these assets because the configurations are the same for both those CVEs. I'm going to expand this pane, and we can see that the count is 5 for both the critical and minor findings. Now, what we can do is we can select all of these findings and then perform an export. Now, we'll export this as a CSV, so that way we have actionable data that we can share with the internal team to go ahead and share these insights, show where we're vulnerable, and or provide those actions to go ahead and remediate the CVE. Now, after the download's complete, we'll go ahead and take a look at the findings report. And we can see the asset IP, the device name, the rule that was checking, the CVE number, and that actionable data, right? We can see that we have, we have some must configurations on the asset. We have enabled on a port. We also have web VPN enabled. And we also have those URLs that we can reference to validate the software version, because software versions are vulnerable, right? And we're highlighting that, hey, you need to be on a different OS version because we're pulling back the current running OS version. So we're able to perform the analysis, provide that actionable data, and highlight what remediation steps need to be taken from a user perspective for assets that are impacted in our environment. As a reminder, it would be best practice to follow your internal compliance schedule for CVE validation and schedule the audit to run within Squirrel Defender for that continuous monitoring, right? As you bring assets into Squirrel Defender, you want to make sure you're constantly monitoring for any CVE exposure, therefore allowing those threats to be uncovered. Hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to the sales team or CS for our current customers to get support on validating the CVE exposure that was announced on Thursday, the 25th of September. Thank you.